Well, hello students, welcome back to Math Specialist class with me, Mr. Alfie. In this video, we're going to learn about factor, more specifically about application of factor. Factor can use to prove something in mathematics, for example, maybe to prove some geometrical statement or even to solve physics problem. Let's check this video out. Proof using factors. Example 1. Prove that the line from the midpoint of one side of triangle to the midpoint of the second side is half as long as the third side. Let's illustrate this with this triangle. Let's OA is the first side, AB is the second side, and OB is the third side. C is a midpoint of OA and D is also midpoint, but from AB. We're going to prove that CD is actually a half of the third side, a half of OB. How to prove it? Let AO equal to factor A and OB equal to factor B. C, CD as a factor resultant. CD is actually factor resultant of CA plus AD. We know that CA is actually a half of A because C is a midpoint of OA, and AD is actually a half of AB because D is a midpoint of AB. So AD actually equal to a half of CAB is a factor resultant. AB is a factor resultant of AO plus OB. We know that the AD equal to a half of AO is actually negative of A, opposite direction of A, and OB equal to B. So CD equal to CA plus AD. This is CA, this is AD. So you just need to multiply a half with all the factors here. So you will have factor CD is actually a half of A minus a half of A plus a half of B. And CD actually equal to a half of B. And B turns out equal to factor OB. So it is proof that CD equal to a half of B. Now, the example 2. Prove that the midpoint of sides of a quadrilateral form a parallelogram. This is the quadrilateral. OABC is a quadrilateral. P is the midpoint of OA, Q is the midpoint of AB, R is the midpoint of BC, and S is the midpoint of OC. So we're gonna form a parallelogram based on these points. So we have to prove that PQRS is a parallelogram. How to prove it? Okay. Let factor OA is actually factor A. This is OA, and factor OB equal to factor B. This is OB, O to the B, and factor OC equal to factor C. This is OC, C. Now we're going to show that PQ, factor PQ, equal to factor SR. How to prove it? Now we're going to find factor PQ. See factor PQ as a factor resultant. PQ is a factor resultant of PA plus AQ. This one, PA plus AQ. We know that PA is actually a half of A, PA, because P is the midpoint of OA. And then AQ is a half of AB. because Q is the midpoint of AB. Now, C factor AB is a factor resultant. Factor AB is a factor resultant of negative A, this factor, plus factor B. AB is a factor resultant of negative A plus B. So, now you need to multiply a half with all the factors here. You got that PQ equal to a half A minus a half A plus a half B. So PQ equal to a half B. Now, we're going to prove that factor SR is actually a half of B. So PQ equal to SR. Factor XR. See factor SR as a factor resultant. Factor SR is a factor resultant of factor SC plus CR. So SR equal to SC plus CR. Now we know that SC equal to a half of C and CR is actually a half of CB. This is CR, a half of CB. R is at the midpoint. Now, see factor CB as a factor resultant. CB is actually factor resultant of negative C plus factor B. CB is a negative C plus factor B. Now, you need to multiply this number through all these factors here. So we got that CR is actually a half of C minus a half of C plus a half of B. This is equal to 0. So SR equal to a half of B. So proved that PQ equal to factor SR. We know that this factor equal to this factor. Now, we're going to prove that factor PS equal to factor QR. PS actually equal to PO plus OS. CPS a factor resultant of PO plus OS. We know that PO is a half of A but in the opposite direction. So PO equal to a half of A plus OS is a half of C. Now we're gonna to prove that QR is also equal to this factor. QR. See QR as a factor resultant. QR is a factor resultant of factor QB plus BR. QB equal to a half of AB because Q is a midpoint, and BR is a half of BC because R is a midpoint. So QR equal to a half AB plus a half BC. Now, see factor AB here, as a factor resultant. Factor AB is a factor resultant of this factor plus this factor, or negative A plus B. And see factor BC here, as a factor resultant of this factor plus this factor. So BC is a factor resultant of negative B plus C. You substitute that to here. So you got QR equal to a half of negative A plus B plus a half of negative B plus C. You just need to multiply a half to all factors here. You will got QR equal to negative a half A plus a half C. So it is proved that PS equal to QR. Now, since PQ equal to SR and PS equal to QR, so it is proved that PQRS is a parallel Lagrange.